Oh, thank you, Emma. This is the April Planning Committee meeting. It's the last Planning Committee meeting of the current council. The first item on the agenda is to receive and accept apologies for absence. And although we appear to be missing one of our aircraft, we haven't had any apologies. So whether David Fuller will make it along later or not remains to be seen. Item PC 2042 is representation from interested parties. We definitely have an interested party present, but since I know what this is relating to, and it's specifically on our agenda, it seems to me that we might as well just get to that item on the agenda and see how we go. That takes us therefore on to declarations of interest. There is literally one planning application on the agenda, although councillors will be aware of an email from Oundle School that we're going to be discussing later, in case that affects anybody. So are there any disclosable pecuniary interests or other interests to declare?
No.
Well, the next item is to discuss a letter of complaint from a resident regarding comments we submitted to ENC following our last planning meeting. This is application NE 21011, sorry, 00164. It was an application in respect of 18 Clifton Drive. And the resident, or at least one of the residents of 18 Clifton Drive, has joined us. Now, when we made our comments, we did so on the basis of the drawings that we had seen posted on the ENC portal. It has since been brought to the council's attention that, unfortunately, and through no fault it would appear of either the applicant or indeed of ourselves, we were misled because the drawings that were on the ENC portal were not particularly accurate and led us to certain conclusions that were frankly wrong. Now, this council has a policy that covers looking afresh at planning applications, and in broad terms, we don't normally do it unless information comes to light subsequently that indicates that we had not been in possession of the full facts and information, and that had we been so, it is possible that we would have reached a different conclusion. And I have to say that based on what I understand, it is very plain to me that had we known what we now know, we would have certainly had a very different discussion. We would not have submitted the comments that we made to ENC. And consequently, I think it is entirely appropriate that we just look again at that application. Now, the application, as I say, was for 18 Clifton Drive. The minutes are actually the next item on the agenda, but just to refresh people's memory, what we had said in relation to that was there is a concern that the creation of a treatment room indicates that the property might be used partially residentially, but also partially for commercial purposes. There is an objection to this due to the likely impact of cars entering and leaving Clifton Drive, a cul-de-sac, to visit the treatment room, and due to the problems that would be caused by visitors having to park on the street when using the treatment room. Then we went on to talk about a concern about the loss of on-site parking resulting from the conversion of the double garage to a single garage, which of itself we said might lead to on-street parking, and said that there should be on-site parking commensurate with the size of the extended property, number of bedrooms, and that we said the drawings provided do not clearly show that there will be adequate on-site parking. What we didn't understand was that the drawings that led us to that conclusion seemed to suggest from the before and after drawings, so there were existing drawings and there were proposed drawings. The proposed drawing showed the creation of a treatment room and a storeroom out of the garage, thereby indicating a loss of garage space, which didn't seem to be particularly indicated by the nature of the application and its description in the first place, but led us, frankly, up the garden path. Because what has been made clear to me since is that the treatment room and the storeroom are already in place. They've been there for some time. Mr. Davis could potentially even tell us how long. But they're nothing to do with any commercial activity taking place at the site. The treatment room is for the personal treatment of one of the occupants of the property. And as such, the whole premise on which we had worried about that application was based on a misapprehension as to the future use of the property and the fact that what was being done would curtail the amount of on-site parking, whereas in fact it had already taken place and was non-commercial in nature. If you actually remove those two items from our consideration, it means that there is nothing on which we would have objected to the application had we known the true facts in the first place. So I'm certainly going to invite the committee to reconsider, because we can write to ENC following this meeting, making it clear that we have since been made aware of these facts, and that in the light of those, we withdraw the previous comments and objection made and potentially move to a situation of no objection. Now, I've said all of that by way of preface, and I might have very well stolen Mr. Davis's thunder, because he may very well have wanted to tell you some or all of that. And for those of you who are not aware, just to add to the fun and games, Mr. Davis was formerly known as Councillor Davis, because he had a spell. He's had a spell on the council. Now, that of itself is, of course, not a reason for either rejecting or not rejecting the application, I hasten to add, for the purposes of the tape. But again, it just makes the position clear to everybody. Mr. Davis has some knowledge of the workings of Oundle Town Council and indeed of the work of the Planning Committee. So without more ado, does anybody have any questions that perhaps Mr. Davis could answer, or any comments in the light of what I've said? Or indeed, does Mr. Davis wish to say anything over and above what I've already said?
I'll wait for the questions if there are any and probably help them with that, or I can give the committee a view, David, if that's okay.
I'm more than happy in the circumstances to allow you to make a representation as an interested person just slightly later in the agenda than we might otherwise have done. So if there's anything extra that you feel that might assist us in our deliberations, please let us know.
Yeah, just to let you know, back in June last year, well, for those who don't know, I've been in kidney failure for a number of years, and I was staying off the dialysis until COVID had sort of, I dare us use the phrase, die away. And I started dialysis in September. That was my training at hospital, with a view of always dialysing at home. And we decided that to meet the needs of the family life, we're in a very lucky position that both of our garages sit next to each other, and one we can get access from our utility room. So we chose that to make it work for us, that we were going to convert one of the garages into a treatment, well, call it a treatment room, call whatever. It's been used as a music room during lockdown when my sons have had lessons from school, Teams meetings and the like. But basically I trained from September, started dialysis in December. I've been here ever since, doing my dialysis 12 hours a week, every other day. And the treatment's going very well. So, as I say, that was all passed under permitted development, going back to June, July last year. Unfortunately, David's right, the chairman's right, that when we submitted the application, I was only made aware of the errors in the drawings when East Northants Planning contacted me and said, "Oh, have you seen on the portal that Oundle Town Council have made an observation in relation to your treatment room. And I looked at it and thought, oh, well, that shouldn't be on there in the first place. And it wasn't until we delved deeper into our drawings that actually they're not particularly good drawings for our plan, but they are almost sufficient to get us through planning, which I think we've succeeded, having had lots and lots of correspondence between ourselves and East Northants to make that happen. But the plans shouldn't have shown the treatment room as a proposal. They should have just shown it as already in place, just like any other room, whether that be a yoga room, a kitchen, a youth study, or whatever else. Because originally I put it in as a study stroke room anyway, and because at the time of putting the application in last year, we weren't actually sure where the dialysis treatment was going to take place in the house, but we needed a bit more space in the house anyway. So that was always the intention, to make a room of some description. And as it happened, we made it into the treatment room. Well, called it a treatment room, but it's Dad's den, apparently, according to the kids. So if that helps anybody in relation to your deliberations in relation to it.
Well, thanks for that, Paul. And what is clear is that we're not now passing comment on whether or not there should or shouldn't have been a treatment room, because that was sorted out last year. Val?
No, sorry, I was moving my light.
Oh, I thought you were raising your hand as if to speak.
Chair, hello, Paul. The explanation is, fantastic, and it seems to me to have been an extraordinary thing that they should even, some of those the treatment should even come into it, because it's sort of somehow an invasion of privacy from my point of view, and it's, yeah, I mean, what can I say? It's it seems like a sort of slightly affront of your dignity and private life in some ways. I mean, I don't think there is any. I certainly don't have any. The only issue I think we originally spoke about was due to parking and cars, and which is something, as an Alder resident, is a big problem for the town. Well, that always comes into those things, so it's the important bit. Sorry.
And every week, I'll just give you, for those, it's in the open now. It's happened. It's been on your agenda. It's in the public domain. It's not some dirty secret that I dialyse every other day. Yes, it was a bit embarrassing when I got the council contacting me. But that said, just to put it into a bit more context for you, every week I have they come and take away my 3 bags of clinical waste for me. So that's a vehicle turns up, no different than an Amazon delivery. And then every month I have stock delivered by the renal suppliers, and they turn up in a van, just like any other delivery. And the only other time is when there is a renal nurse that visits in the event that I've not had a particularly good session, probably the session before. And so they'll come and check that, make sure that things are running smoothly and the like. But apart from that, that's it.
Yeah.
We can cater for
as far as I'm concerned, it would have been a very, very simple decision, I think, without that word treatment room.
Yeah, I know.
On it. And that's it in a nutshell, really, for me.
Does anybody else have any comments? Otherwise, I'm going to propose A, that we allow ourselves to reconsider it, and B, that we notify ENC of the withdrawal of our objection, explaining how we were unintentionally misled into the situation that we found ourselves in. Everybody happy with that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fine. Well, I'm sorry that happened. Perhaps if one hadn't been looking at those drawings quite so carefully, we wouldn't have ended up making the genuine mistake that we did. But there we are. It's been put right as best we can now. We wish you well personally, and hopefully your application can now proceed without any further issues as far as ENC are concerned.
Yeah, best wishes.
And you're welcome to stay with us if you wish to stay. Equally, you may leave us at this point.
I will know. Thanks very much. I'll leave it with you. Take care.
Yeah. Bye, Paul.
Good luck.
Bye.
Right, the next item on our agenda is the minutes of the Planning Committee meeting that we held on Tuesday, the 2nd of March. Present were myself, Councillor Chesser, Councillor Humphreys, Councillor Glenn and Councillor Robinson. All those who were present, those have been circulated. Are we happy with those minutes?
Yeah, I will.
Yep.
So I propose...
Happier now, of course.
Yes, well, proposed by Councillor Glenn, I think seconded by Councillor Humphreys. All those in favour, please indicate. That's a full house. I'll sign those after the meeting and get them back to the office. That brings us on to the one planning application on the agenda, which is probably something of a record to be down to a single application. It's in respect of 9 Cotterstock Road. Some councillors may recall that at one time the Lindham Nursery was based in that property, but it's now purely used as a dwelling house, and essentially it's going to be made significantly bigger and significantly reorganised so that much of the ground floor is changing round. To add this 2-storey rear extension, which also enables them to end up with 5 better bedrooms than they currently have, two of which in the new extension bit would be with en suites, 2 small side windows looking out from there across towards number 7, but the actual house of number 7 is on the far side of the plot from number 9, so it's some distance away. I set it all out in the note that I circulated prior to the meeting, so unless anybody really needs me to repeat any parts of it, there was nothing sort of staggering about the changes that were being made. They're altering the colour of the render and re-rendering, completely new windows, etc., and doors throughout. I suppose I should add, bearing in mind what we've just been saying, that the proposal doesn't add to the number of bedrooms at the property, and Highways have specifically said that they don't have any objection to it because there is no increase in bedroom size or any other reason to think that there would be an increase in movements to or from the property onto the Cotterstock Road. And I have to say, looking at it, I couldn't see any planning grounds to worry about it, particularly since it doesn't appear as if the neighbours were worrying about it as of Sunday when I checked the website. I think it was Sunday. Councillor Chesser.
What colour is the rendering going to be?
Off-white it's described as, which probably isn't that different to the cream colour that it's described as currently. It's certainly not, it's not something like bright red or something like that, which we might possibly have had a bit more of an issue with.
No, I walked past it. I walked past it today to have a sort of quick look at it, and there's, you know, you could do an awful lot more to that house than they're actually planning, and still have plenty of parking and everything else with it.
Yeah.
But the parking at the front of it is very substantial, so it's, yeah, don't think it's anything we have to concern ourselves with, really.
Well, I don't hear anybody objecting to any aspect of it, so I'm going to suggest we simply record that as a no objection.
Yeah.
So I can work my way back to the agenda. The other items are looking at planning outcomes. You'll notice that in relation to 9 Latham Road, we had said that we wouldn't object unless the NC felt that it did amount to overdevelopment. And clearly they did, because they refused it on basically that ground. So we were alert to that one. Secondly, we objected to 5 Ashton Road as well. And perhaps relatively astonishingly, because it doesn't happen to us that often. We objected to 2 planning applications and both of them were refused. Whether we're getting better at this or not, I don't know. But anyway, they seem to have. We got the
It puts the
outcome.
delegates into a false sense of security. I think.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Yeah,
You wait, they're
it
waiting
won't
for the
last.
big ones.
Yeah.
So, the basis that I'm sure that our clerk, who is standing in for Lisa tonight, will be pleased to have one meeting that ends comparatively quickly. We're on to any other matters, or relevant matters for report only. The clerk circulated an email that came from the bursar at Oundle School. And in case anybody didn't pick up on it, it was a very short email just saying Oundle School is working with a planning consultant to develop a long-term strategy for its estate and land holdings. Well, that comes as no surprise. As part of this work, a proposal has been submitted to East Northants District Council for consideration of the school's land off Benefield Road, known informally as the Golf Range, and they provided a picture. This work is in respect to policy EN24, Oundle housing allocations, proposing an additional site to ensure that the district has a sufficient rolling supply and mix of sustainable housing sites, both in Oundle and the district as a whole. This is a necessary technical step to ensure all options for the land can be held open in the future. There are no current plans to sell the land and no decisions have been taken on its eventual use. I'm assuming that what they mean is that they kind of put in some kind of pre-planning to ENC to sound them out about it. Now, what strikes me about that, amongst other things, is that, of course, ENC's local plan has been published. It includes the proposals for housing allocation, which presumably will be adopted by the North Northamptonshire Council, which came into existence on the 1st of April, which I hope is not an omen. And that, of course, designates 3 sites, 2 of which have already got outline planning permission anyway, for the residential housing in Oundle up to 2031. Now, this site has come perhaps slightly out of the blue. We were aware, of course, of Biggin Estates' interest in other land north of Benefield Road, which was included in our own sadly abortive neighbourhood plan. And of course, former councillor Rose has a site off Herne Road, which he is also interested in gaining permission for. Between those 2 sites, they could probably accommodate somewhere in the region of 450 houses, which is getting on for twice the number that under the core spatial strategy Oundle needs in the period to 2031, which is already overcated for by the proposals in the local plan part 2. Of course, we didn't like the local plan part 2. We said that actually it wasn't sound, and that it wasn't sound because they had failed to consider properly the alternative sites, which indeed we had concluded in many instances were better than the sites that they had put forward. Indeed suggested that since effectively the thing had been preempted anyway by the grants of outline planning permission for 2 of the 3 sites that were proposed, the reality was we probably didn't need the 3rd site off Stoke Nora Road by the cemetery, because the other 2 sites effectively would house up to 260 dwellings, which is enough on the face of it to meet the requirements to 2031. So I suspect that we might be slightly less than impressed at the thought of another site being put forward, other than to say, if you're really taking a long-term view and you're saying this should be considered post 2031, well, of course, that's a different ballgame. But if they're suggesting that they might want to bring it forward for development in the period up to 2031, I rather anticipate that this council would not be in favour. Anyway, any other thoughts on this?
You've got it absolutely right, David. I mean, it seems to be because it's that actual site would infill, wouldn't it, from the end of where the houses stop on Bennefield Road to the Bennefield Estate, the Bigham Hill Estate section. It's actually, it would so in fact the housing would go all the way sort of practically out to the golf course almost on the other side of the road, on the north side of the road. So it would, you know, it is a considerable increase in many ways. I mean, I don't know. It seems like if you own land around Oundle and you fancy making some money, I mean, that sounds, I don't mean that to sound as cynical as it's coming out, but you know, you can put your field up for prospective planning permission and that's it, you know, so I don't know.
I think you summed it up, actually. Cynical or not, it's probably true. They're not actually looking forward to, in case something happens to the existing local plan and it's found to be unsound. Would that have any bearing on it?
They don't say so, but maybe that is part of their thinking, that if our objections to the local plan are sustained, of course, the practical effect is there wouldn't be a local plan for a period other than an increasingly out-of-date RNOTP, so that it might open up almost on a first-come, first-served basis applications for development, arguing that there isn't a local plan, so they're not constrained by one. It's almost a case of we're damned if we do and we're damned if we don't. If we succeed in frustrating the local plan, what happens might be worse than the outcome of the local plan. Absolutely. On the other hand, if we just allow the local plan to go through as it was, it would have run counter to everything that we felt was appropriate over the last few years. Well, we took a decision that we had to make a stand on it and say what we thought. And I guess the same thing holds true going forward. Now, whether we want to make any kind of formal response to this, I'm not sure. I see that Emma has her hand up, so let me defer to her.
One of my thoughts, now that we've got the new council, there's always that possibility that they can change all of what's happening even at the moment with regards to the local plan, because if they suddenly decide that they want to split areas up in a different way or something like that, then we could start again through all this process.
Absolutely. I mean, I think what it does open up for me would be, you know, it would make sort of the Glapthorne neighbourhood plan redundant as well, because there's all the land that's between, you know, on the Glapthorne Road down into Glapthorne, all that farmland there.
Yeah,
it would make all of that becomes instantly available to housing estate. If it just sort of rolls on like this, then the whole thing becomes everything that we fought against. You know, it's you're absolutely right, David. It's you know, we are damned if we do and damned if we don't. You know, it's just opened a huge sort of Pandora's box that everyone has to rethink.
Councillor.
Councillor?
Yes, please.
If the local plan fails, which I don't think it will, then we wouldn't want this site anyway, would we? So, because we'd prefer the sites that we selected for our own plan. So wouldn't we object in any case?
I think we would, and my instinct is to say that actually we put this on the agenda for full council, indicating that it's already been considered by the planning committee, and that our recommendation to full council is that we go back to the school and we make it very clear to them that we would not support this land for residential development at any point in the next 10 years. and that if it is to be brought forward at all, it should be for the next period beyond 2031, when this site could be considered alongside whatever other sites are then available and being considered against whatever the assessed housing need is at that point, but that it is simply premature to try and bring this forward now. I mean, would that sum up other councillors' views, or is that purely me?
I mean, I don't think we can do anything other than that. That sounds totally reasonable to me, because else it negates everything we've done so far.
Val, you haven't.
Well, I'm just wondering if, I mean, years and years ago, there used to be a thing called the county structure plan, I think it was called that, where you could, the land, for instance, off Ashton Road or off Herne Road, at the back of Herne Road, was always on that plan. But can you actually, I didn't think you could sort of bank land anymore. You know, how much would we be held to anything over this? They're not putting in for planning permission, are they?
No, I mean, it sounds to me as if they're simply sounding out the local authority, but by informing us, it almost invites us to make a comment. And it seems to me that if we're being invited to make a comment, then we should make clear what our view is. And it seems to me our view is, as I've just articulated it, subject to the view of the full council if they go and surprise me and have a different one. But I don't think they will.
And has this gone into the old East Northants Council or to the new North Northants?
Well, they say it was submitted to East Northants, and bearing in mind
that's
it was
what I thought.
sent on the 1st of April, and I don't think that of itself that's a significance. That was the day that ENC ceased to exist and North Northamptonshire Council came in. So on the assumption it was submitted before that, it went into the old ENC planning department, but that's effectively simply been absorbed into the new authority. It's not like everything stops and has to restart. So the new authority will be looking at this and responding in whatever way it sees appropriate. It of course then begs the question whether, in addition to potentially letting the school know the council's view once full council has reached a decision, whether we should also let Northamptonshire know at the same time.
That's what I'm thinking.
Logically, the answer to that ought to be yes.
Yeah.
It can't do any harm to make clear from the outset what we think of this.
I mean, we've already got some preferred sites.
Well, exactly, and this wasn't previously up for grabs. I mean, you go right back to our neighbourhood plan. The school, perhaps somewhat surprisingly, didn't put forward any land at that time for us to consider. This seems to be something of an afterthought for whatever reason. And we could argue they've missed the boat. And it seems to me that we'll put it on the agenda for full council.
Yeah.
If it takes the view that I think it's going to, we'll presumably let the school and Northamptonshire know. But it might be one of the last acts of the current Oundle Town Council, which might not be a bad way to sign off, really, by a show of some slight defiance in the face of the odds. Right. Other than that, any other relevant matters for report by anybody?
No, none from me.
Failing which, I think we're in the happy position of being able to conclude this meeting in, if not record time, certainly relatively quick time. Thank you for your attendance tonight, and we'll see you in a fortnight's time for full.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Everybody.
Bye to all.
Bye-bye.